The first panel of the day is on how the sector can take their businesses to the next level by going digital. The panel is called Enabling Digital India, and please join me in welcoming on stage Manish Patel, founder and CEO of MSwipe, Ravish Naresh, the founder of Khatabook, Sairi C, the founder and CEO of Shiros, Nikhil Arora, the managing director and vice president of GoDaddy, Ved Narayanan Vedantam, apologies, the SME business head, Razorpay, who will be moderating this talk. Put your hands together and welcome them on this virtual stage.
And a very good morning to everybody who's joined us here on a beautiful morning here in Bangalore. And it's what's been what's been essentially the fag end of 2020, which has been an unprecedented year. It's been a year of change. It's been a year of turmoil, but the year is coming to a close, and no better way to bring it to a close than at FTX 2020, which is India's largest fintech summit. A big hello and a welcome to all of the audience to day 2 of FTX 2020. Hi, Ravish. I hope you can hear us all right.
Hi, Wayne. I'm good.
Yeah. Pleasure having you here. And as I said, FTX is India's largest fintech summit. And this is day 2 of the FTX conference. We had a fantastic day 1 with a whole host of marquee speakers. And we'll certainly try and do justice to the momentum that has been built up over day 1. Have with me a fantastic panel of speakers. Have with me Manish Patel, founder and CEO of MSwipe, Rockstar founder. Great to have you here, Manish. Ravish, founder and CEO of Khatabook, serial entrepreneur. And Khatabook was mentioned by the great Rajan Anandan yesterday as being the fastest growing SaaS company ever. So great to have you here with us, Ravish. And Sairi, who's trying to bring a revolution, amongst women, amongst the entire women ecosystem. Women who are looking to get back into business, women, helping women in life in general. Great to have you here, Sairi. And a big hello to the audience. I hope all of you are doing well. Trust all of you are safe. Your loved ones are safe. And great to have you here on a beautiful Saturday morning. So a big thank you to the panelists once again for joining us. The topic for today is to look at how do you digitize India? What is the way forward for SMEs in the digital economy in India? And while we begin, I think it's only appropriate that we acknowledge the T-Rex or the elephant in the room, the inflated elephant in the room, which is the pandemic itself. And 2020 has been the year of the pandemic. So I'm going to start with you, Ravish. If you could talk about what have been some of the changes that you observed from your vantage point as the founder and CEO of Khatabook, which is looking to digitize a lot of previously offline SMEs. What has been your viewpoint? What have been some of the changes that the pandemic has actually brought about it with regards to digital need states of SMEs?
Got it. Firstly, thank you, Veda, and FTX team for having me here today. So in terms of pandemic, we were actually cruising fairly well till February. Then Mr. Modi announced a very strict lockdown, and we saw more than half of our business completely shut within a week. Our user base went down by half. So we saw across all parts of India, small businesses being completely shut for the couple of weeks. But what has happened is over the last couple of months, as lockdown successively opened, we saw all of these businesses come back up. And what has happened is over the last couple of months, most of the businesses that had shut down are operational and are 90 to 100% of their transactional value pre-COVID. So most of the recovery has already happened. In terms of user behavior, what we have seen is, the pandemic really stretched the small businesses' cash flow, and Khatabook addressing that particular core need. We've seen our an acceleration of adoption. So we're right now at a peak that is 40% greater than our pre-pandemic levels. So we've definitely seen an uptick in adoption post-pandemic.
That's pretty interesting. Thanks for that, Ravish. At Razorpay, we've seen a very similar trend across the entire SME ecosystem. Obviously, the months of March and April were extremely tough months, not just for the fintech ecosystem and the SME ecosystem, but for the world overall. But we've seen a very strong rebound and a bouncing back of the entire startup and the SME ecosystem, which essentially is the heartbeat and the nerve center of India's economy. We've seen some very strong signs there. And at Razorpay, we often think of ourselves as an index fund that sits on top of the entire startup and the SME ecosystem in the country. And we've seen some fantastic growth, both in terms of inward money movement, in terms of the SME's ability to be able to receive funds, and in terms of their ability to be able to pay out funds through our suite of business banking Razorpay X solutions. So very similar trends that we've been observing at Razorpay. And Manish, I'm going to come to you next. So from your vantage point, and you are one of India's leading providers of POS machines to a lot of SME business owners. So what have been some of the winds of change that you've observed?
As we kind of went into this pandemic, like Ravish mentioned, pretty much the same effect across our network, right? We're largely offline SME. We saw a large part of our network go inactive, but success. I mean, post that as the lockdown has eased, most of these businesses have come back. However, we are still seeing about 80% activity, pre-COVID compared to Khata book. But what I'm noticing in particular is that for the first time, there's a very strong interest and demand from SMEs to truly go digital, right? I mean, we've been dealing with these businesses for a long time. These are largely offline businesses, and there has never been such a strong pull or desire for these merchants to adopt newer technologies and newer ways of doing business, right? And I think that is the big change, where I think we've kind of started reaching that inflection point, or already have reached that inflection point, where businesses are thinking of ways of digitizing, overhauling, and generally using technology to get more efficient. And I think this is now not going to stop, right? I mean, it's going to continue unabated, and hopefully this will bring about a sea change in the way businesses look at productivity tools, and I hope over time pay for it.
That's a very interesting point, Manish. You mentioned that this is not a temporary change, but this change is here to stay. This is a baseline shift.
Yeah.
That's what I'm hearing. And I'm going to come back to you on that point very quickly before I move to Sari. And Sari, from your own vantage point, what have been some of the changes that you've observed? And you've been working with a lot of women entrepreneurs. You've been helping a lot of them across their life cycle of entrepreneurship.
I think the total number of women online was just 10 million. Okay, and I think between 2017 and 2019, that number climbed up to 300 million almost. And the challenge still was adoption was low. And we all know that women are just about 10% of all transaction volumes. Everything else in your life went online. It just increased adoption pretty much, at a very stratospheric levels. And just to give you a little more sort of sense, when we went into the lockdown, we were 16 million women on our network. And by the time we came out in 4 months, we were 21 million. That's the fastest growth we've seen on our network. And the other correlating statistic here is India has one of the poorest women in workforce participation.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
We know that number is, really, really at the bottom of the. So what is?
I read an article somewhere that said Bangladesh had more.
Bangladesh was ahead of us. It's way ahead of us. I mean, that really tells you everything that we need to know about this number.
Yeah.
But the other thing that's happened is what is corporate India's loss? The women in salaried jobs, or women in formal workforce, or even any form of wage work. That hasn't grown. But what has grown is women in what we call micro-entrepreneurship, women in self-employment, women in gig work. So any woman out there today with a phone, UPI, is essentially a micro-entrepreneur. And that's the segment we have seen grow. Even on our entire platform, basically everybody has become, everybody has a shop. Even if they don't have a shop, they have a shop. Basically they have social audience, they have a device, and they can collect payments. And I think that kind of sets the tone for the change we are seeing. And what we are seeing grow really, really rapidly is, again, I think a lot of women are still in the segment where they're a solopreneur. But we will see this become, their move to SMEs, employing other people. So today, India has estimates say about 16 million women who are entrepreneurs. And in about 2 to 3 years, we will see this number become 35 million. And each of these 35 million women will employ at least 2 more people or 3 more people in the network. So that's a sub-economy of 150 million to 170 million in the next 2 to 3 years that we are seeing, all driven by women. And I think it has a direct impact on a lot of segments. Financial services for sure, but also consumer consumption, right? So I think one of Flipkart challenges was to build this market, the credit card market. But we will see consumption across D2C, across social selling, social buying, education consumption all go up. So it's a really interesting year by all measures.
Sure. Thanks for that, Sari, and a big welcome to Nikhil. Thanks for joining us, Nikhil. How are you doing? Good morning.
Hi, Reza. Thank you.
Yeah, Nikhil is the India MD, Managing Director of GoDaddy, which is one of India's leading domain name registration providers, and again a big enabler and an engine for growth with regards to SMEs, jumping onto the digital bandwagon. Glad to have you here with us, Nikhil, and great to be sharing the dice with you once again.
Thank you. Pleasure being here.
Yeah, pleasure. Likewise. And for a quick trivia about Nikhil, for people in the audience, he's a big fitness enthusiast, and I happen to be a huge fan of some of the stuff that he puts out. And thank you once again for joining us. So, Nikhil, we were just going around the room and talking about, what kind of winds of change we have observed from our respective vantage points with regards to SMEs actually embracing digital and jumping onto the digital bandwagon. And I'm sure you've got a fantastic viewpoint, and you must have some very interesting perspectives to share with us. If you could provide a quick sneak peek.
Yes. Thank you, and thank you. Pleasure being here with Manish, Ravi, and Sari on this dice. As many of you are familiar, right? GoDaddy, we're in the business of empowering everyday entrepreneurs, small businesses, and essentially when folks' digital journey starts, right? That's when GoDaddy comes in. When people think of what do they want to call their business, which is a domain name, and then how do they want to be discovered, which is when the website and other products come in place. So what we've really seen, I think, in this kind of lockdown and ongoing pandemic, are kind of two types of shifts, right? One is clearly folks who were always offline, right? And I think I heard Sari talking about the number of businesses a bit before in India. Depending on which research report you go by, whether it's SMEs or 50 million or 40 million, the reality is huge. And again, depending on which research you go by, the number of people who are online are still 1/3 or less than 1/3 of it, right? 8, 10, 12, whatever number you pick. So there has been this kind of polarization where there was a belief on the certain side and kind of not a belief, but more of a barriers to entry for the other ones. What the pandemic has done has actually, kind of even forced, I would say, the hyper-local businesses, even the hyper-local small businesses which perhaps never thinking of being online, at least even for discovery, if nothing else. That shift's happened.
Yeah,
we've seen everybody who say, okay, I need to be, kind of found online if people are searching. So I think that's number one. Number two, I think people who are already kind of online, small businesses, but are only there for discovery purposes, now have really accelerated their desire to be able to, do commerce, grow their business. So if you look at like branded websites, right? Branded websites in India versus say the marketplace, the difference is huge, or perhaps the most extreme in any part of the world. You generally see 70-80% of commerce happening on marketplaces, and the rest of it is very scattered. The branded website market has grown 88% in the last 6 months. So the desire to now actually transact, and I'm sure Razorpay and other players have seen that, really real time in terms of the transaction happening. And third, I think the desire to do digital skilling, which is a big part of, which was a barrier before, right? That has really taken off, where people are really, small businesses and employees are really focused now to kind of learn and what's going on.
Lots of interesting points there, lots of interesting perspectives, Nikhil. I remember reading a news interview that you had given, I think a few quarters ago, possibly a year back, where you mentioned that more than 50% of GoDaddy's new customer acquisitions today are actually from tier 2, tier 3 and below, which I think is a very interesting insight. And I think it is about time for tier 2, tier 3 and tier 4 in India, a lot of entrepreneurial hotspots in the country, for them to actually step up and join the digital bandwagon. It's not just about the Bangalores, the Delhis, the Mumbais, the Hyderabad, the Chennais of India, but a lot of real Bharat and tier 2, tier 3 and tier 4 businesses actually joining the digital bandwagon. I think it's time for them to step up to the plate. And we've observed some very similar trends at Razorpay as well. I'm going to go to Ravish first. And I know, Ravish, that I'm assuming the heart of your business is tier 2, tier 3, tier 4. But have you seen some changes there in terms of digital adoption trends?
So very similar to like I was mentioning before. What happened was a post-COVID cash flow got really hard hit for small businesses across. In fact, their consumers were also like in a lot of cases out of jobs. Their cash flow was hit, which in turn hit the retailers' cash flow. So we have seen we right now have more than 60% of our users from tier 2 and beyond.
Wow.
And I think it's not just the pandemic. It's actually very, very thankful to Mr. Ambani for investing, $24 billion in Indian telecom, and enabling users to enjoy the world's cheapest data. So the biggest tectonic shift actually, was before the pandemic, which has now led to Indians consuming more data per capita than Finland or even South Korea. I mean, so that enables users to explore and experiment and try out so many new apps, and which is why we've seen so much acceleration in terms of digital adoption, especially in the smaller towns where users have just come online.
Yeah, standing on the shoulders of giants. So Reliance and Ambani and Jio has played a huge part in the digitization journey of India, for sure. That certainly is a very interesting quotable quote from you, Ravish. And a quick shout out to the audience. We're having some very interesting giveaways running on Twitter. We're having some very cool Amazon voucher giveaways for all of those people who can pick up these kinds of nuggets of wisdom from our panelists here and put it up on Twitter. Use the hashtag FTX2020 and tag us as well, and you stand a chance to win some very cool giveaways. A quick, shout out to the audience for all of you listening in. Please do that. That was certainly something that I would take away. I remember Jeff Bezos in an interview talking about how all of us stand on shoulders of giants. Amazon was built on the fact that the internet infrastructure was already in place, which was built on the fact that the long distance phone network was already in place. They didn't invent any of that. They just got to build on top of that, very similar to a lot of us, right, who are essentially benefiting from larger ecosystem level changes which have been brought about, which are essentially outside of our control. So a philosophical point there from you, Ravish. Thank you for that. And another quick point that I would like to talk about, and Manish, I would like to pick your brains on this, and this may not necessarily be the greatest news for you, Nikhil, is the fact that one change that we've been observing with regards to SMEs in their life cycle of adoption of digital, they're actually skipping a step. The earlier traditional way for them to jump onto digital was to first set up a digital storefront or a brand presence, and then they would look at possibly digital payments as an afterthought. But today we're seeing entrepreneurs coming on board who are in a hurry to start receiving digital payments. They don't want to spend time in actually setting up a digital brand presence first, which explains the growth and the big hit and the resonance of the market of a lot of Razorpay's no-code products, as we call it, like payment links, payment pages, payment buttons, which literally, and we've actually timed it, take less than 5 minutes to start using. We've actually timed it as 4 minutes, 32 seconds. And which essentially means that they are not, so having a digital brand presence is no longer a prerequisite for a lot of people to start receiving digital payments. Manish, I would love to pick your brains on this and hear your viewpoints on this point.
No, I mean you're absolutely right. I mean, I think what is leading this embracing of digital, especially by smaller merchants, is from the fact that they need to get paid, right? And proximity payments have reduced significantly, during COVID, and which is one of the reasons why other forms of payments, whether it's digital payments, online payments, contactless payments, these are seeing really explosive growth. This has also been I would say fast tracked by enablement of almost instantaneous onboarding, right? Especially for domestic payments, and this is really helped merchants and SMEs across the country, just come online, like you said, in 5 minutes, at least experience what it is to accept payments, digitally, and then they're doing this on a very familiar interface, right? So unlike someone having to actually go digital in the earlier days where you had to actually go buy a PC, understand what a PC is. I mean, for an uneducated person to kind of do that, is I would say slightly, there is friction. But you're doing this on your mobile phone.
Yeah.
You're doing it wherever you want. And, the tools that you're using are, which is apps, etc., are they're not intimidating, right? I mean, people can kind of start understanding that.
Yeah.
So I think, all of this combined, has really helped, the smallest of the small merchants and people to kind of adopt this trend.
Very interesting. I'm going to I'm going to pick on one particular interesting word that you use, which is the word of intimidation. And I serve as a mentor with various startup and SME, acceleration programs across the country. And one of the consistent points of feedback that I often hear from a lot of startups and SMEs that I interact with is the fact that they feel a sense of intimidation towards digital even today. And they need some level of hand-holding, education, mentorship, and helping them navigate this digital jigsaw puzzle, so to speak. And at Razorpay, we've identified 2-3 specific areas of focus where SMEs and startups need some hand-holding and help on. One is digital literacy, financial literacy, and compliance. And I know this is a topic that is very close to the hearts of both Nikhil and for Sari. So I'm going to come to both of you. I'm going to go to you first, Sari. If you could talk about what have been some of the educational areas that you have, double-clicked on from an SME and a startup perspective.
Right. So I think one of our biggest learning and one of our biggest playbooks is that India thrives on communities in the offline world. We are the country that has the Anganwadi network. We're the country that produced Seva. We're the country that has the microfinance revolution. So we've done extremely well in the communities playbook. And obviously all of that has existed in the offline world. And a lot of what we do is really, rinse and repeat that online, So I think a lot of change making or a lot of educational effort, a lot of seeding effort for new behaviors is actually in trust. And communities are the best source of trust. So our learning is all business is social, and this is exactly what we see across this room and maybe outside of India, outside in India, that consumerization of big tech is happening. And what is consumerization? It's basically making it easy for people to consume technologies in a social setting, and whether it is in their immediate work cohort or whether it is in their immediate social cohort. And for us, I think that's really been key. So what we've realized is basically is building trust via information awareness, really invite the pull-based approach as opposed to push-based approach, because that leads to a lot more frictionless adoption when it happens. And when the adoption happens, it goes through the curve. Like it's really not linear anymore, because then it goes through the hockey stick curve very, very quickly.
Yeah.
Invest in trust for a long period of time, and then open whatever tabs you want to open. And for us, I think that's been a playbook. But also, I think the other piece is, I think, deep segmentation.
Yeah.
A lot of work around SMEs or business has been still very institutional in nature. And I think consumerization of this effort is very important. And internet allows you to do that. Internet today exists in various formats, right? From WhatsApp groups to Shiro's communities to everything we see along. So these are two typical trends we have at least extensively.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Community-led training efforts. That certainly is an interesting, takeaway for me. And just a quick reminder to the audience to use the hashtag FTX2020. Paraphrased nuggets of wisdom or actual nuggets of wisdom that you can take away from the session, please put it out on Twitter, tag us, use the hashtag, and you stand a chance to win some very interesting Amazon vouchers. I'm going to come to you next, Nikhil. And I know you have a pretty ambitious, university program where you're looking to upskill, reskill a lot of SMEs and startups. So if you could, give us a quick perspective there.
Yes. And before I come back, just going back to the earlier thing, the payments category actually is the right category for people to come online, and in that the branded web store actually is just when customers start thinking about growing. Right? Payments is instantly, I want to do business, I'll send my link to somebody. Sure. That's
just to set the record straight, what I meant was people still need a digital storefront. They're probably, at least some of the entrepreneurs, they're probably doing it later. They're looking at payments first. Some of the entrepreneurs are looking at storefront first and then payments, but
and some may not ever look at storefront, to be honest, because things are now very disruptive in that nature. But I think coming back to your, I think the issue of skilling and education, right? I think one of the biggest shifts which has happened in all of our worlds is the role of the government, right?
Mm.
There was never a time in history of any business where government had decided when you're going to open shop, when you're going to close shop, and perhaps how you're going to run shop, right? And so as we're looking at the future, this is a great opportunity for the government to be getting involved with the private sector, really. There have been a lot of programs in the past, but this is like a platform because where the influence is huge right now.
Mm-hmm.
What we have really learned, and we've recently launched during the lockdown something called GoDaddyAcademy.com.
Mm-hmm.
And what we've picked up and learned over years from small businesses are that the basics of education, like in our category, like what is a domain name? People think domain name equals websites, right? Why do I need to have an email? People run on kind of generic emails which you and I used personally for years. And don't really understand why your brand should be, whatever your business should be associated with your email, because that's an opportunity every time you're communicating with your customers, right? And so on. So I think the importance of making skilling programs, one is very, I would say, relevant in the language. Obviously, something Ravish, obviously is doing, like, going to tier 2, but in the language they understand, and as next set of 200 million internet users are coming from non-English speaking part of the country.
So
how do you create content and all the learnings in the language they understand? Second is, no matter what we do, India is always going to be a DIFM market, in my belief. No matter what we say, we can talk about DIY, we can talk about awesome product, getting on board in 5-10 minutes. In my view, we just as a nation, and especially smaller parts of the town, you need the help, because think the environment they grow in, the constraint they grow in, the barriers they grow in, right? How do we enable education with some hand holding, right? Instant, I would say, kind of canned, recorded kind of the content is great, but then they need some sort of a support, whether it's high touch, low touch, medium touch, and those on, right? So doing that is very important. And third is, I think, keeping the relevance of kind of ultimately they're in the business of skilling, but ultimately making profit, right? And so as you tie the skilling to something which is like up leveling their business, gives them incentive to do that. Otherwise, it's like personal improvement. But small business, they want to invest in personal improvement, but the time is short, right? So in that sense, having the course and content there, and the role of communities, I already mentioned, I don't want to go into it, but ultimately, India learns in groups, India learns in communities, India learns in those small kind of, offline, smaller, groups and so on, right? So the GoDaddy Academy in this sense was a small step where we went in to say, hey, what is the domain name? What is the website? Why should you sell online? What should you do to sell online? People get overwhelmed by what is SEO, what is SEM, like all that stuff, right? So breaking the jargon, complex jargon into very simple things, and also telling people what you don't need to learn today. It's good to learn, but don't need to learn, because otherwise the overwhelming nature of digital learning is huge.
Yeah, completely agree. And one of the other things that I've observed is that people understand what are these terms, SEO, SEM, etc., but at a conceptual level, at a high level at least, but what they struggle with is knowing what should be the number one priority for my business. And that again is a question that they certainly need some help on. But you spoke about a very interesting point there, Nikhil. Thank you so much for those perspectives around local vernacular. And Ravish, I think you've done a lot of great work there. Yesterday, Harshil and Shashank announced about how at Razorpay we are embracing local vernacular in a big way. And I would love to pick your brains, Ravish, in terms of the role that local vernacular has played at Khatabook. Even today at Razorpay, on what is a significantly larger pie than what it was 12 months ago, we've noticed that more than half of the sales team's conversations today with SME business owners is not in English. It is in Indian languages. And I would love to hear your thoughts and perspectives there, Ravish.
Sure. So at Khatabook, we saw users from the initial days coming mostly from the hinterland. So from our initial days itself, we supported the app in multiple languages. The app currently has 13 regional languages, and what we have seen is clearly activation and the funnels improve considerably if the merchant has sort of chosen his local language at the time of onboarding. And his use of product also increases because he's much more familiar with his local language. So definitely that has contributed towards ease of use and accessibility. And so right now we at Khatabook have users in more than 95% of Indian districts. So it's an extremely deep penetration, and most of them are outside of the larger metro cities, and most of them do their business every day in their regional language, and that is what exactly we intend to support. So we intend to stay as relevant as local as possible, and that's been our ethos from day one.
Interesting. Thank you for that. Manish, I'm going to come to you. What kind of impact do you think local vernacular has played or can play with regards to helping SMEs and startups digitize?
Look, local vernacular is just I would say basic hygiene, right? I mean, without that, you can't operate in India, especially once you leave the top 30-40 cities, and even in the big cities. The moment you leave the high street, the side street is all local vernacular, right? It is not English. That is very, very clear. And which is why we launched our terminals 8 years ago, and while it was an MPOS terminal, we took great care to make sure that we had very simple things sorted out, right? I mean, it's impossible for us to have 10 languages on a terminal. Mm-hmm. But then we made it very simple by just putting LED lights, a nice sound every time there's a successful transaction, simple things like that. And while I'm digressing from the question, vernacular is like I said, it's just simple hygiene. You can't do anything in India if you don't address that. Yep. Right at the start.
Yep. Cool. We've got some very interesting audience questions that have been coming through. So I'm going to pick some of the more interesting ones, and I'm going to, paraphrase it. Obviously, the year of 2020 has been the year of the pandemic, and that has accelerated, digital adoption for a lot of SMEs and startups, across the length and breadth of the country. If not for the pandemic, how long do you think it would have taken India to get where it is today? I think that's a very interesting question. And Nikhil, I'm going to begin with you and get your perspectives. If you could give us a sense.
The interpretation of question meaning the digitization acceleration.
If there was no corona this year, how long do you think it would have taken India to get where it is today with regards to digital adoption?
Yeah, so I think factually, I think I would obviously love to see India a lot ahead than it is today digitally, but we're getting in the right direction. But I think the acceleration has happened, I would say, like almost leapfrog of like 7 to 8 years, what would have taken, and when I'm saying 7 to 8 years, it's more about the interest level and people jumping to say, hey, I need to do something. Yeah. Right? Before it was like, I can live and survive forever. So that I think is almost close to a decade, difference.
Wow. That's pretty amazing. And I think that's pretty interesting here, even here at Razorpay. We've not just seen a huge growth and an acceleration in terms of newer and newer businesses embracing digital payments. We're also seeing more monies being processed through the Razorpay ecosystem, both from the inward money movement cycle and the outward money movement cycle, which essentially means that these are businesses with strong product market fit, with strong fundamentals in place, and they're able to sell consistently to their end customers. And because they're having strong inward money movement coming in, they're also able to pay out more consistently. Ravish, I'm going to come to you next. And I know that the corona situation and the pandemic has accelerated digital adoption. If not for the pandemic, where do you think we would have been? I know you had some pretty strong views on what happened during the months of Feb, March, and April. But if not for the pandemic, how long do you think it would have taken for India to be where it is today?
Yes, I think I have a differential view on this. I think the emerging markets.
I thought so as well.
Emerging markets got hit by the pandemic a lot harder. And plus, I've seen that the e-commerce and digital trends accelerate a lot faster in the West compared to what they have in India.
Sure.
I think most of the small businesses in India, like we didn't have any support. There was a lack of like cash grants directly from the government. And across the Western world, we have seen governments, dig in their cash reserves and support, give out cash grants for a lot of small businesses. But none of that happened in India. So unfortunately, like I think India would have fared a lot better without the pandemic. We were already at least Khatabook was already on a very fast growth path that got interrupted. Of course, we're like back at it again, but I think there was definitely a disruption in between. And I think all our macros would have been a lot better had we not lost those couple of months.
Interesting. Sure. I'm sure the economy, of course, is still yet to get back on its feet. I was just, the question was more specific to the digital economy alone in terms of the ability of SMEs and startups to, to actually embrace and jump onto the digital bandwagon. Sari, I'm going to come to you next. What have been some of your observations? What is your perspective here?
Right. So I think there are two things. One is, of course, I think the directional march of digital is unstoppable. I think the pace can go from second gear to fifth gear, depending on what kind of quarter we are having and what's going on overall in the economy. But I think the directional march is unstoppable. That's for sure. We did see a silver lining in, women adopting digital because I think everything moved up. Children's school went up, government services went online. So I think overall, that's a great thing, but we also saw it was a hard time, and we run a helpline on Shiro's, and we saw a surge of cases, queries which were, domestic violence, abuse, anxiety, all that go up. So I think there is a little bit of mixed bag there. But having said that, I think these are one of those, momentous moments. When it's there, it is what it is, and you do what you can with it. And I think a lot of what we saw was that, people rising to the occasion to really make a shift in their life for better, for a large part of what we saw. But of course, I think India is an everything nation. Whatever is true, in terms of our growth and our numbers, the opposite's equally true. Change does take a long period of time, and like what Ravi said, it's not like everything is teed up, for SME or for a small business owner, or even though there is a lot of momentum, but I think we still, I would still call it a mixed bag. There is a little bit of silver lining to the cloud.
Yeah.
In terms of adoption, but that's really it. I think it looks good from our vantage point, but
Sure.
when you sort of, just change your viewing position, it kind of changes completely.
Yeah, thanks for that, Sari. Manish, I'm not going to ask you that question. I'm going to ask you a slightly different question, which I'm sure you'll enjoy answering a lot more, which is around, there's this very interesting question that has come through, which essentially is saying, for a prospective or for a wannabe entrepreneur today, what kind of nuggets of wisdom would you provide that entrepreneur for them to help navigate this new post-pandemic new world order, so to speak? And I know that you've been through a pretty interesting roller coaster journey in your own entrepreneurial, life cycle. I remember reading an interview of yours where you mentioned that you grew up as a kid in a circus, and from close quarters, you got to see a lot of multi-talented, multi-skilled artists actually perform, and that gave you a lot of life skills which helped you later in life as an entrepreneur. So any advice, nuggets of wisdom that you can provide for entrepreneurs starting up today in terms of building for digital India?
Well, the nugget is very simple, right? I mean, the world has, in my view, changed fundamentally when there has been a confluence of three fundamental technologies, right? I mean, whenever energy, communication, and transportation. Whenever there has been a massive shift in technology over a short period of time in all of these three together, the world has fundamentally shifted, right? And that's exactly what we're experiencing now, right? It started with the telegraph, steam engine, and coal being discovered and being used. That was, the world saw, industrialization. Post that, we saw acceleration when you had the telephone, fossil fuels, and cars. That's the internal combustion engine, kind of really changed the world. And now we've got the internet, we've got electric cars, and we've got, renewable energy, that are all coming together. And I think this is fundamentally changing the world. And this is, I think, the best time, for wannabe entrepreneurs to truly participate in this, I would say, pivoting of the direction of humanity, right? I mean, there is so much happening, and there could not be a better time than to pursue something that you truly enjoy, right? I mean, and that's one of the only things that has been my North Star. is that unless you really enjoy something, right, you truly, you should do it. And if you do, that's the only thing you should be doing. Your life's too short.
That's a very interesting point. What you're essentially saying is that there's never been a better time. The best time is now for you to be an entrepreneur. Heard some very similar lines from Ankur Wariko in one of the earlier sessions that we were having with him, in a webinar, a month back. And Michael Siebel yesterday mentioned something on slightly neighboring to this, where he said that there's never been a better time for you to raise funds from venture capitalists. That's something which he also mentioned. And that certainly is a very interesting takeaway. And a quick mention, last couple of minutes in the session, a quick mention and a reminder to the audience to use such nuggets of wisdom and tweet it out. Use the hashtag FTX2020, tag us, and you stand a chance to win some very interesting Amazon vouchers. And Ravish, I'm going to come to you in what could probably be the last question of the session, but we'll try and see if we have more time. But if you could very quickly help us understand the mirror image to that, right? The mirror image to the question that I just posed to Manish in terms of what are some of the banana skins that entrepreneurs need to be careful of and stay away from as they navigate this digital jigsaw puzzle. And I know you've been a serial entrepreneur yourself, so if you could help provide some advice.
Sure. I think from my experience of running a couple of ventures, especially housing, has been to stay as close to business fundamentals as possible. In the hubris of venture capital, sometimes we just forget of focusing sometimes on our business models. And sometimes our valuations stray away too far from reality. So I think what I've seen is especially early founders who are raising funds in this environment for the first time is not to get carried away by the hubris of all of it, and just stay focused and grounded, and keep talking to the users, and continue building with their heads down in the ground. So.
Yeah, very philosophical line there, Ravish. Very deep. Thank you for that. Nikhil and Sari, closing comments from both of you. As you crystal ball gaze towards the next 18-24 months, what kind of predictions would you make? One quick prediction from both of you, Nikhil and Sari, with regards to the future of digital India. Nikhil, aapke liye pehle.
All right, thanks. Before I go there, I wanted to just say one quick thing. I think Sari had mentioned about opportunities for women. One of the shadow to that, I just want to, this is the interesting point for the country to use online adoption to accelerate women inclusion in the workplace, right?
Very interesting.
I'll just show you one stat. During the lockdown, somebody had done a research that all the Zoom sessions which were happening, right? All these conferences about, different topics, women representation was less than 15%, some cases even 10%, and sometimes it's 0%. And which was very startling to say, this is a time when we can actually change that curve, right? Because until now, because of the limitations of whatever we did in the past, right? Women inclusion in workflows in any form of structure, we could take from like 20% to 40, 50%, which is where the emerged economies are when they become successful, right? So I think it's a great opportunity, but that's been a shadow of the lockdown that while we did some of it, but we missed a lot of the boat, right? So I just wanted to call out, it was a very important point as we look at the future. In terms of looking forward, I think, the good thing is that a lot of work of, I would say, the education of digitization or awareness, this lockdown has accelerated, whether it's 10x, 2x, or 1x, and then we can argue, but I think that's the good thing. But I think from an SME point of view, I think working capital would be tight. I think as my panel folks and stuff, right? Business conditions are going to be tight. So I think, the next 2-3 years having solid focused on unit economics, and I don't mean that everybody needs to be profitable, but, just making sure your basic model is in place, and maybe you don't go for super growth because there's a pressure of, oh my God, pandemic has happened, everything is digitization, now I'm missing the bandwagon, right? Making sure your basic unit economics and basic things are in place, as you kind of think. So it's a good chance to rebuild right now. You may have lost something or you may have not, but it's a great time to rebuild and really look at the playbook, which is very different from the in the next 5 years.
Awesome. Some great thoughts there, Nikhil. Thank you so much for that. Sari, I'm coming to you. Some quick predictions for the future of digital India from your own perspective.
All right. So I think India is seeing one very strong payment revolution and one very strong e-commerce revolution. Both of them happened without women's participation on both sides, consumers as well as vendor side. I think what we're going to see next, 2 to 3 years, this participation go from less than, let's say, 15% to at least 30%.
Yep.
And I think the next wave of payments, as well as consumer adoption of technologies, will include women, and we're already seeing that we're at maybe at 5% of that change already in place, and and without that, I think we can't really build a digital economy. We can't repeat the failures of industrial revolution all over again into the digital revolution. So that's my prediction.
Thank you so much. Some wonderful thoughts from Nikhil, Ravish, Sari, and Manish. Thank you so much for joining us today and spending an hour of your time on this Saturday morning. And a big thank you to the audience for having joined us today. Stay tuned. We've got a bunch of other interesting sessions lined up for the rest of the day. Thank you so much once again for joining us. Stay safe, take care, and wish everybody good health. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks.